Shohei Ohtani's ability to swing between the mound and the batter's box has always felt like a cheat code for baseball fans, a cinematic, once-in-a-century talent that makes lineup cards and pitching staffs bend in new ways. But the Dodgers' plan to lean on that two-way status in October has morphed from intriguing strategy into a league-wide gripe. Rivals say the way Major League Baseball's two-way rules are written gives Los Angeles an unfair roster advantage in the postseason. MLB.com. Here's the nuts and bolts. MLB's two-way framework, the set of rules that allowed Ohtani to both pitch and hit regularly, includes a specific allowance that, on days a player starts as a pitcher, lets him also be listed as the team's designated hitter and remain the DH even after he's removed from the mound. That small technicality effectively means a team can have one extra arm available in October when that two-way player is treated as the DH on the roster instead of a pitcher. Rival front offices argue that when Ohtani is used as a starter who stays in as the DH, the Dodgers can carry 13 other pitchers plus Ohtani, in effect 14 available arms, while every other team is capped at 13 true pitchers on a 26-man postseason roster. That discrepancy is the spark of today's controversy. Los Angeles Times. Why teams care? Roster math and playoff baseball are about margins. In October, bullpens are the currency of postseason survival. An extra usable arm can be the difference between a short series and a deep run. Opponents see the Dodgers' ability to count Ohtani as a DH and still tap him for a mound appearance, or to remain in the lineup after starting on the bump, as a loophole that inflates Los Angeles pitching resources relative to everyone else. That complaint isn't hypothetical. Executives and beat writers are openly saying they're upset, and a few outlets are quoting players and decision-makers who call the edge real. But before the pitchforks come out, context matters. This rule isn't a brand new invention cooked up for the Dodgers. It's evolved out of the league's recognition of the unique talent Ohtani represents and the desire to let two-way contributors replicate the role he played in earlier seasons. The league adopted and refined two-way provisions starting in 2022, and teams have had time to acclimate. The Ohtani rule nickname stems from that evolution. It was specifically designed to allow an elite two-way player to occupy both pitching and hitting duties without forcing the club into awkward substitution mechanics that otherwise punish such versatility. In effect, MLB created the pathway that now looks advantageous. There are two separate debates here, though. One is the rule itself unfair, and two is the Dodgers' usage of that rule a reasonable competitive decision. On fairness, rivals have a valid gripe if the goal of a maximum 13-pitcher rule is to standardize pitching availability across clubs. The letter of the two-way rules creates an asymmetry. One team can, under the specific mechanics, carry more true arms when a two-way player is properly categorized. That's a quantifiable roster advantage. On the other hand, it's also a rare advantage that requires a player with legitimately world-class two-way chops, a player who can both start and contribute as a hitter at elite levels. Very few clubs can sign or develop that talent, and the rules were partly intended to permit that rare case without creating an impossible tactical puzzle. Essentially sports, strategically, the Dodgers aren't shirking risk by entertaining Ohtani for relief or outfield duty. They're weighing trade-offs. Using Ohtani out of the bullpen or in right field during October isn't risk-free. It exposes him to increased throwing volume, less predictable routines, and the familiar concern about workload for a pitcher with prior elbow surgeries. Dodgers manager Dave Roberts and the medical staff have to balance the marginal roster edge against the physical reality of protecting their superstar's arm. Reports indicate the front office and coaches are discussing creative deployments, but they're also cognizant of the long-term risk. That's the calculus. Leverage the rule where it helps without burning the asset that made the rule relevant. Reuters, expect fireworks in two arenas. First, expect continued public whining from rivals and hot takes from the media. That's already happening. Second, expect the sport's governing bodies and perhaps the competition committee to face renewed pressure to clarify or tighten the mechanics before they become a structural imbalance. MLB has options if it wants to close the gap. It can change how two-way players are counted for postseason roster limits, e.g., explicitly counting two-way starters against the pitcher cap, require the two-way player to be listed as a pitcher or DH exclusively for roster purposes, or create a special postseason exception that trims any practical advantage. Any change, though, risks penalizing the very flexibility the league built to honor extraordinary talent. Los Angeles Times. From the Dodgers' perspective, the decision is straightforward. Use every legal advantage available to win. Baseball is a rules-based sport. Teams exploit clarity in the rulebook all the time. Platoon advantages, defensive shifts until limited, roster construction around arbitration, and so on. The Dodgers signed a generational talent who, because of his unique skill set, interacts with the rulebook in special ways. The club's conversation around Ohtani in the pen or as a late-game bat is less a moral failing and more a competitive optimization inside the rules as written. That pragmatism will irk purists and rival GMs, but it's the same logic that has driven every team to find efficiencies wherever the rulebook allows. Reuters. For the rest of the league, the moment is a call to arms. If this loophole, as rivals call it, tangibly alters playoff fairness, then the remedy is procedural, not personal. The MLB Competition Committee can move faster than it usually does when there's unanimity about competitive balance. The only catch: midstream rules changes are controversial. They risk altering team plans and could be perceived as retroactive applied hastily. Practically, a statement of intent plus a rule tweak for future postseasons would be the least disruptive path, while also signaling that the league takes competitor concerns seriously. SI finally, let's call the real truth. Very few teams will ever get this advantage because very few players can pull it off. That fact should temper the outrage. Ohtani is a once-in-a-generation combination of arm and bat. Most clubs will never, ever have to worry about contestants mirroring this exact wrinkle. Still, rules shouldn't be judged only by frequency. They should be judged by consequence. If one player's classification meaningfully changes the competitive landscape in October, the league will and probably should consider adjusting the mechanics so the postseason remains as level a playing field as possible. Short version, the Dodgers are playing within the rules, rivals are right to point out the asymmetry, and MLB will soon have to decide whether that asymmetry is an acceptable oddity or a competitive problem that needs fixing. Meanwhile, Ohtani keeps doing what he always does, forcing everyone else to chase on the field and in the rulebook. Los Angeles Times. Imagine a postseason where one player effectively gives a team an extra weapon, on the mound, at the plate, and maybe even in the outfield. That's the conversation shaking up October baseball right now, because Shohei Ohtani and the Dodgers might exploit a rule that lets two-way players stay in the lineup after they leave the mound. MLB.com, here's the setup. MLB's two-way/DH tweak, sometimes called the Ohtani rule, allows a player who starts as the pitcher and is also listed as the designated hitter to be removed from pitching and remain in the game as the DH. That small text change has a huge ripple. It means Ohtani can start on the bump, get through an inning or two, the bullpen can take over, and LA doesn't instantly lose his bat. MLB.com now add the Dodgers' real dilemma: a dominant lineup, but a shaky bullpen. Management has openly discussed creative options for Ohtani in October, including the idea of using him in relief or even starting him in the outfield so he can enter later as a pitcher without sacrificing the DH spot. It's unconventional, risky for his arm and routine, but it's also why this team could be uniquely dangerous in short series. Reuters. Not everyone's thrilled. Rival clubs and some beat writers are calling it a loophole that gives LA an unfair postseason edge, effectively letting them carry what feels like an extra pitcher or an extra bat compared with other clubs. That gripe is less about Ohtani himself and more about competitive balance. When one franchise can flip roles mid-game without penalty, opponents worry the playing field tilts. SI practical reality matters too. Ohtani hasn't been a reliever in the majors and hasn't played much outfield this season. He's routine-driven and team-minded, but managers must weigh injury risk and timing. The Dodgers can't just bend rules without consequences. Fatigue, matchups, and postseason intensity are real limits. Still, the mere possibility forces opponents to prepare for scenarios nobody else can deploy. Reuters. So what's the takeaway? Baseball got a tweak meant to recognize a once-in-a-generation talent. Now the sport faces a choice between celebrating creativity and rethinking fairness when one player changes